G'day. I'd like to welcome to my country, the Gumbaynggirr country. From the oceans to the mountains. This is all our country here. Welcome to this beautiful place. Look after it and you'll look after you. First of all, I'd like us to acknowledge we are in the lands of my people, the Gumbaynggirr people, and to acknowledge my ancestors who have walked this land for thousands of years. Imagine flying over our lands. Look down and you see the huge rainforest, the huge trees that we no longer see, the abundance of the plants and animals that were available to the Gumbaynggirr people. Such a rich lifestyle, so many resources from the ocean up into the mountains. Food was plentiful for the Gumbaynggirr people, sharing everything, allowed all them mobs to come into our country. Walking the ancient walking tracks, knowing exactly where they're going to the right place at the right time and the food will be available. Just look over these lands and imagine what it was like before the early settlers came.
The view from the range was magnificent. At our feet was the narrow glen of the Bellingen, choked up with dark green impervious brush. The brush contained the finest cedar and rosewood I had ever seen. The trunks of these trees were often 6 feet in diameter and 90 feet high before they threw out a single branch.
Bellingen in those days, it was a little agricultural town. In Bellingen, you could get everything that you needed in Bellingen. In those days, Coffs Harbour was 1,000 miles away. You never even thought of Coffs Harbour.
The two main industries in the valley were logging and farming.
Well, in those days, if you look at the Bellingen up here, the entire economy was pretty well based on timber and dairy.
When we did that, we'd wipe the whole valley out, the whole gully out. Today we'd be jacked. Beautiful water, when we first went there, it was black by the time we finished. I can still see it, in the bulldozers in the gully and up the gully with the water, Today we'd be jailed. But that were those times. I didn't know much more then. Right. That was my job. That was where I was getting my income from.
This is the untold story of how a small group of alternative lifestylers and hippies came to a small, dying dairy town halfway between Sydney and Brisbane. That town was Bellingen. In the 1970s and 80s, Peter Geddes, a journalist and local shop owner, used his 8mm camera to record what happened in and around Bellingen during that time.
I was a journalist, and what you're about to see now is the story I found when I came to Bellingen. We bought an old station wagon and a trailer, and we drove all around the east coast of Australia looking for a nice place to live. We turned off at Raleigh, 7 miles to Bellingen, and drove up this absolutely wonderful valley, and we were just absolutely gobsmacked at just how beautiful it was, but how deteriorated it was, just how run down and sad it looked. All the buildings were dilapidated. I'd never seen so many rusty roofs. Everything was just rusted out. No one had painted anything in the previous 30 or 40 years. And we drove into Bellingen. It was a weekday, I think. Didn't matter in those days. If it wasn't a Friday, it was deserted. There was just nobody in Bellingen. No cars even. It's not nobody. I just laugh when I go there now and I can't find a parking space. You could have parked anywhere in those days.
It was dying in the late 60s. People were deserting the place like rats leaving a sinking ship.
There was a guy called Bill Chapman who was a real estate agent. We got him to show us around. We told him we were looking for a small acreage and we wanted to be what we would now call earth gardeners or something, but in those days we didn't have a name for it. He'd been showing us around for weeks and we weren't getting anywhere much, and he said, "Have you ever thought of owning a shop?" I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, there's these people, they've got a shop opposite the hotel and they want to sell it really badly." And we said, "Oh, I'll have a look at it." And we looked at it. It wasn't a very impressive place. It was pretty awful. It had a condemned sign on the front door, which didn't really put the price up too much. We moved into it about a month later. All of a sudden I was, got this rundown building, 5 kids in school. The shop was open from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. when we took it over, 7 days a week. Our only customers were literally Bellingen people, and there just wasn't anybody else here. And there were so many people in Bellingen in those days who had never been out of Bellingen. You know, to go to Coffs was a sort of a major trip for a lot of them.
It was also, remember, the time of the dairy quota.
People who were just eking out a living on dairy farms when the CDA, the Central Dairy Authority down at Raleigh, decided that they had to go onto bulk milk, that they couldn't sell cream to Britain anymore. Britain had joined the Euro market, and so cream was no longer the go. They had to put in these bloody stainless steel vats, and they were huge, and they cost $3,000 each, and that doesn't sound much today, but that was a new Holden in those days.
They worked like slaves, morning and night, and got no more than the dole.
And so farmers, they were basically going out the door backwards.
So they'd all packed up and left the valleys.
So about all of a sudden there was dozens and dozens of empty farms.
Fundamentally it was because most of those people that were affected were in the rural areas, because they were on farms that weren't terribly successful.
They just weren't making a living.
They were the ones most affected. They probably didn't want to leave their farms, but they had to because of money.
And then the farmers went and got a job in Shire, the mill, in the bush or something like that, because they just couldn't make ends meet.
As the dairy farmers sort of went under and had to get out, that's when the new generation, if you want to refer to them as hippies, sort of started to move in the early 70s and right through to the 80s.
In May 1973, the citizens of Nimbin, only 3 hours north of Bellingen, found themselves in the centre of a social revolution. What started out as just the annual party for the Australian Union of Students became a cultural turning point.
It was that peak of excitement at the end of the anti-war, anti-conscription movement, when anything seemed possible. The Whitlam government had been elected, and we're out to change the world.
Oh, we have our ups and downs. Oh, people getting busted for growing dope in the hills, swimming naked in the creek.
We were young and optimistic. We dreamed big dreams.
I'm sure that a lot of people are going to go from here and carry on with this way of life.
The Aquarius Festival came and went, and all these people who didn't decide to live in Nimbin, they went off on the road looking for somewhere like Nimbin, and many of them turned up in Bellingen, and our shop became like a magnet for them, because we did sell yogurt and we did sell smoothies and all those sort of hippie stuff.
They sold land to the people that couldn't afford it in Nimbin, and effectively those people reinvigorated.
You could get a really nice house with electricity and hot water and a kitchen that worked, a tap inside and all that sort of thing. You could plug in a fridge, $5 a week. And it wasn't sort of just, like 300 hippies arrived in Bellingen. They sort of arrived, old Holden by old Falcon, single mums, young couples, runaways.
And we were buying up all this amazing land in this beautiful valley.
And that's what happened. The hippies bought the land.
Little did we know
It was fertile ground, which we were happy to have. Plenty of timber for building and plenty of water. What else do you need? Because we were the first ones to buy in the area, we were quickly followed by a lot of their friends.
The whole idea, if you wanted to get onto some land, was to buy some shares of other people. You split it, 3, 4, 5 ways, and because the land was pretty cheap at that time, you could get onto sizable acreage for not very much money. And that was really a way that the hippies actually were able to buy the properties in those valleys.
I love the fact that you could actually buy a bit of land and chop a tree down and dig a hole and put it in the ground and build yourself a house. And there were no rules and regulations and applications and fees to pay. We were just doing it regardless for what the consequence was going to be. And the social interaction was very comfortable and very free. And it was like being a part of an experiment, getting in at the early stages.
Well, people basically moved up there and started camping on their land or their mate's land or pretty well anyone's land. And then, I guess because it rained a lot, they liked the idea of having a roof, so they started building shacks. And they were shacks, like some of them were, and people had moved into cow bales and all sorts of old buildings that were around. And some of the shacks eventually turned into houses, but nobody got permission because they were nothing more than poles they'd cut from the bush and some old tin that they'd managed to find to put on the roof.
Nobody had a clue about building houses. I've been in private school, they don't teach you how to build it. They didn't have a clue. So wigwams are pretty popular. Then there were these sort of brush cubbies that were supposed to be huts, but they weren't, of course.
Like dropouts, society's dropouts, living in caravans up to the bush and all sorts of stuff. And that's the only thing that when I was on council that we insisted on doing. People were getting knocked back for building and so forth. Good people. When next door over the fence there was lots of dwellings going up that there was no approval for, right? And they didn't use their brains, the alternates. It's a pity because it might have been a much nicer area if they had.
I think of going to the Bellingen council chambers when Ray Cork was the Shire president. Ray Cork was a real beaut old bloke. He was Cork's Motors up in Dorrigo. And Ray said, I don't know what all the fuss is about these little houses. He said, when we were pioneering this valley, we all lived in shacks. We all just had little houses. He said, the house I grew up in is probably just about the size of the table here in this council chamber. He said, the hippies are okay, that's what we were like. That's just what we were doing. And he said, now that we're old and tired and respectable and we've built our proper houses, we're down on them. They're all right.
A lot of the hippies were from wealthy middle class families. A lot of them were well educated, and this had intimidated the locals at the beginning. They felt very uncomfortable because they knew these people were trained in ecology and they knew what they were talking about when they were saying protect the rainforest. They knew what they were talking about when they got into the organic gardening and started the organic movement.
Somebody had to sort of come in and sort of replace the farmers that were sort of having to move off. And I think a lot of the young people that came in here, they probably had the backing of their families to a large extent. I mean, they probably come from quite well-to-do families. And, you could bloody buy a farm for $10,000, you know what I mean?
It was like I'd found myself in heaven. I found this family. I found this family who I really loved and got on with, and we had a riot of a time. We laughed and we played and we made love and we'd got stoned and had food and just celebrated that lovely lifestyle that we were really busy inventing.
I loved it. I've been a fairly, not a regular visitor, but I've been visited a few times to Mullumbimby, and the idea that this was here hadn't occurred to me.
The freedom of the way of life all day to do as you pleased. And the way people interacted, they weren't judgmental. Everybody was accepting of one another, no matter who you were and where you came from. And everybody was interesting, and that there were such a variety of people from different walks of life. You really felt like you were part of making something special.
Jumping off the deep end, you give up your job, your career.
It was like an experimental lifestyle, the sharing, which only a few years before, when I'd heard about Nimbin, I'd poo-pooed the idea of that sort of sharing. But once I got here and saw to what degree it was working and what it was creating, it was giving you free range to develop ideas and things that I'd never gone into my head before. And I love that.
We used to sit round, dens of squalor drinking 60-cent flagons of wine, I didn't smoke dope then, but some of the others did. And discussing just what's going on now. Right. Been sitting around for 46 years waiting for the fucking the world to fucking implode, and there still hasn't happened.
Every day was mad. Every day there was something going on. There was the day that Madame Lash came in and we were not sure what she was doing, but there was a whole crowd of people and we were moving something. There was something being moved across the bridges.
Go.
The other thing, I'm not sure whether people moved to the north coast because the old dairy farm areas had magic mushrooms, and I think that might have been an important motivator for hippies, because this is before they grew dope or anything. They just go up there and you really need a cow to some cow pats for it to grow in, and then it was like free trips.
Everybody was smoking dope.
We were stoned from the moment we got up to the moment we went to bed at night. And I did that for about 3 years, and I got a very good connection with nature. I felt deeply connected with things. I started to feel very creative. I let go of a lot of my academic training and my family structure.
They introduced the marijuana to this district. Prior to that, I hadn't even heard the word.
I think there was resentment that somebody could come in and take up land and, from their eyes, do nothing but bludge on the dole before it became obvious that we were all supporting ourselves with a bit of marijuana growing as well.
Well, everybody was growing their own dope here. Everyone. We were in the Green Triangle.
One particular fellow, he was a pretty big dope grower, and he pulled me up one day and he said, "Darcy," he said, "when are you going to wake up to your bloody self and stop chasing those skinny cows around and get into something that's going to make some real money, Yeah.
And I seem to remember there were a few kind of cannabis cup type things up there. Harvest festivals where people would bring...
Oh yes, the biggest bard, their prime bard, and they got judged and stuff, and people walking in with it. And I sort of liked it too because we were always outside the law, and so outside the law was actually where you lived. I mean, you didn't pay much attention to the law, like if you're a dope smoker.
It was illegal, so that was a very fringe part of fringe culture, so they had a lot of negative things that went with that.
And of course some of them were selling it to their mates in Sydney, making a few bob. But every penny of that money was spent in town because we were all building and trying to keep old cars on the road and things. So, it kind of made the town boom.
Soon there was not an empty house to be found in the district, and property values started to climb. It was culture shock of the first order.
Bellingen was at that time a town in transition. There was a fair few empty shops. A lot of the farmers were leaving, selling off small parts of their land to newcomers. It was a transitional time, and there was both acceptance and non-acceptance in pretty equal parts there for a while.
I mean, most of the townspeople, I mean, they were really anti-hippie. I mean, these bunch of bloody scumbag, dull bludgers moving up, and I mean, they deeply resented that. No question.
And they just walked around as if they owned the place. That's how the locals felt. They felt they had been run over.
Some of them weren't really clean.
Right.
And, little kids running around weeing in the gutter was very different for oldies, the old townspeople.
I mean, for me, everybody had to work. I mean, that was the thing, work. And of course, that was when that period first started. It was a little bit of a culture shock for me, And
they weren't doing their 80 hours a week.
They weren't, mate. No, they weren't. And plenty of girls around the place, and people swimming without any clothes on, and all that sort of stuff.
Right. What did you think of that?
It didn't worry me, but it's not the sort of thing that I'd sort of grown up with.
The old farmers actually quite often liked the hippie women. They thought they were fantastic. Their long, beautiful hair and their see-through blouses, no bra, skirts down to the ground and beads, flowers in their hair. They were absolutely mesmerised. But they hated the hippie men. They hated the long hair and the beards and the beads. They thought they were a bunch of poofters or something. Pansies. Couldn't stand them.
We didn't know what type of people they were, whether they were, because they were so different in their ideas, and worried about the drug side of things. There was a lot more drugs coming into the area because of that.
The Good Food Shop became a focal point and was often buzzing while the rest of Bellingen dozed.
Ian and Martha thought the Good Food Shop was great, but they said Bellingen needs to expand, like Nimbin did. All these empty shops here, there's nothing happening. The town is, just obviously you're the only business in town that's got any customers, anything's happening. And there's cars parked outside your shop. Is there anywhere else, somewhere big? We need somewhere big because we want to organise a play fair. They had this concept of a play fair, and I said, what's a play fair? And they said, the people you've got, the hippies, have all got skills, they've all got crafts, they know how to make things and do things, and these schools, modern education isn't teaching anybody. No one knows how to knit or sew or paint or draw or make a pair of sandals and play music. None of that's happening. They're just teaching reading and writing and arithmetic kind of thing in the schools. So we need to do that. And I said, well, there is an old school here. They just built a new one around the corner. This is the old school down there. Have you had a look at that? No. And I said, come down, I'll show you. And we went down there, and of course there were smashed windows and broken glass, and we managed to find a door that was hanging off its hinges and went in, and there was bloody wheelie motorcycle tracks all around the floors where kids had been hooning around. But it was a bloody nice building, you could see it, it had been built back around the turn of the century, and back when there was plenty of wood and big slabs of it, and had a lovely floor, even if it did have black marks all over it from tyre tracks.
Solid as oak and really suitable, with a huge auditorium, offices.
It was up for demolition.
I went and asked the council, could we use it? And they said, some bloke called Brian Keyes is going to demolish it. He's given us $350 and we sold it to him. It was out for tender and he was the successful tenderer. I was there at the council meeting and I said, why don't you let the public have it? And they said, oh, we can't because it's already tendered out.
Tendered
We've got
out.
Yeah, well, I knew that. I was there.
And I'd put in 6 tenders.
And they accepted it. And he turned round and decided he wasn't going to demolish it after all.
It became officially known as the Community Centre, affectionately known as the Com Centre, and scathingly, the Hippie Embassy. Strategically located on a corner block opposite the Post Office and RSL Club, the Com Centre stuck out like a sore thumb. For 5 years, it was the most discussed building in Bellingen.
It was a pretty nice little effort, actually. It was
A pretty what effort?
a nice little effort to take over some buildings that council didn't want anymore and try and make it a centre out of them, and it was terrific.
Oh, I walked in there and fell in love with it.
Because?
Of all this wonderful crowd of creative people.
No, well, the first thing we did there was start the kitchen up.
Daily meals, that sort of thing, a craft centre, a welcoming place for people who obviously didn't fit into the CWA model.
The Com Centre, the Communist Centre, we'd never go there if you paid us. We want to get rid of those people. They're troublemakers. They're the worst thing that's ever happened to this town.
It was a deliberate ploy to improve the lot of these people. And anything went as long as they were the beneficiaries. And that's why people got crap.
What do you reckon was the most successful thing that ever happened there? Certainly the market was the biggest stirrer. I mean, I don't think there was ever anything top that. Just for a shitstorm.
They nearly got into trouble for that, didn't they?
Oh, dead. That's more or less what caused the public meeting, I reckon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The first Bellingen market was held at the Com Centre that same spring. Over 1,000 people attended.
Well, I remember the very first market and how horrified the town were, how many people were here. I think it took them aback.
The main street, which was normally deserted on a Sunday, was lined with cars. It was all too much for some Chamber of Commerce members.
And somebody had some dope cookies there. I don't know who that would have been. And they were going out to selected customers with the lemongrass tea.
And that was the kind of market it was. It wasn't for selling. We were just there for fun, to see each other and for the townspeople to see us. And they saw us and didn't like us one bit.
The Chamber of Commerce demanded action from council and got it. The Community Management Committee was fired. That action was endorsed later at a rowdy public meeting of 800 people.
Did you see that when they had the community centre that became a significant focus for it all? Like the market that they had and stuff
that was the part of it. You know, it had come to a peak by that stage, and everybody had...
But that's what more or less led to the infamous, famous public meeting that you chaired.
Yes.
Well, get rid of the hippies meeting, that's what it was, really.
That was the indicator to the well-to-dos in the community that things had to change. And they did start to change fairly quickly.
In what way? What was...
Well, people shouldn't go pushing others around.
Right. So who was pushing who? I'm a bit vague.
The alternates were pushing all the old-timers out. All out of all the rural communities, all out of the public halls.
And so every logger who lived in or near Bellingen was required to go there. But in order to get them to go to the meeting in the Memorial Centre, they were allowed free drinks at the Diggers Club next door. So they were all pretty pissed by the time they came to the Memorial Hall. They got there just before all the hippies arrived, and their voices were loud, of course, and said all the right things that good loggers are supposed to say.
The whole situation seemed to be escalating, and they had the sort of now famous, I think, public meeting in Bellingen where they decided that they shouldn't have any of these hippies in town at all. The community centre should be burnt to the ground.
And your ladies burying their babies in the bush.
Losing my job, what do you guys think you're doing? You're ruining our country, you're ruining our land, blah, blah, blah.
Demands of get the hippies made one spectator compare the event to a Nazi Germany rally.
Hippies were accused of virtually everything from burying their babies in the bush to sort of, you name it. It was a fairly hostile meeting, and it was probably the biggest crowd that had been seen in Bellingen in that time frame.
Dear me, that was a horrible night.
It's horrible, wasn't it? Really horrible.
When the council gave the old school to the hippies, there was a definite time limit. It was always the council's plan to knock it down and build a new council chambers. I guess no one ever expected the community centre was going to be such a raging success.
We were bloody arrogant.
Yeah, a little bit.
We were fucking arrogant.
No, we were cheeky, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
They had the public meeting and got permission to pull it down, and they still fought about it for years, but ultimately it did come down.
It took council another 3 years before it could legally demolish the Comm Centre. During that time, councillors learned not to write the new settlers off as a bunch of no-hopers.
You know, they thought we were rabble because of how we dressed. You know, they thought we were tramps, but then it turned out that we were actually not only educated but well connected.
Many new settlers had university degrees and successful careers behind them. They had considerable political knowledge and knew how to get help from state and federal government departments.
You know, we had a lot of political clout. We could get a ministerial ear if we really needed to.
We really thought that any other town in its right mind would be grateful for what was happening with it.
Eventually, though, every appeal and legal challenge to demolish the Comm Centre was exhausted. Finally, it became apparent that while the Comm Centre stood, it would always be a bone of contention in the community.
The council workers started taking it to pieces and taking the tin off the roof, and we were just taking the tin off the truck and nailing it back on the roof.
I was there taking bits of wood and nailing it back up as they were pulling it down. At that stage it looked like we were fighting a losing battle, and sure enough that's what happened.
And then the second time they came basically in very early hours of the morning, and by the time, you know, we'd rallied people to protest, they'd half demolished it. It was very sad.
Murph Brownlee had a chainsaw and he was chainsawing those verticals, those studs, he was chainsawing. He was chainsawing the building, and I stood with my legs but either side of this vertical piece of timber that he was chainsawing, and he kept on chainsawing between my legs. That's a true story. He didn't stop and I didn't move.
There was no way that building was going to be allowed to stand in front of those beautiful new council chambers.
But it was very sad and very thoughtless.
It was just such a wonderful place, and then to see suddenly it being destroyed, it was horrible. Really, yeah.
Such a beautiful old building. It had housed generations of local people as a public school. It would seem such a waste of a wonderful space.
It's quite amazing. It's hard to stand here and think how bitterly fought over this couple of acres of land was, that it just meant so much to everyone at the time, and God only knows why the townspeople were so opposed to it, because it was absolutely quite extraordinary.
It's a real hole now that there's nothing like that in Bellingen, because it never got replaced.
Within days of the destruction of the Comm Centre, the Good Food Shop was destroyed by fire. For many, it looked as though Bellingen had lost its two front teeth.
God, the two buildings that meant the most to me in the whole town, they were both gone.
And it took the heart out of the alternative movement. They didn't want us in town, okay, we wouldn't go.
Yeah, Bellingen. A great place. Yeah. Happy place for lovely people all dancing around the maypole and chucking flowers at each other. It was the most vicious, brutal, nasty little scene while a small mafia of people ran it, and slowly they died off, moved away, and generally just left the field of play.
After the first market, the hostile town meeting, the demolition of the comm centre, and the good food shop being destroyed by fire, Bellingen lost much of its appeal to the alternative community. They decided to concentrate their energies in the valleys, build their own schools, hold their own markets. The next market was held in Kelang and was a raging success.
Yeah, come gather round a fire, gather round and sing. It's time to get together, all the time has come to bring back the call of the wild, the fall of Babylon. Let's stand tall with the trees, break down these walls and be free. Yeah, bring all the colors, bring all the sounds, bring all the beautiful things to be found. Bring them to the table, bring them to the feast. We shall bow down to the north and to the south and to the west and to the east. Gather round the elders, their stories to be told. Oh, gather round the fire with the wisdom of old. Bring all the children, bring them to the wise. See the future of our grandchildren and our children's eyes. Yeah, 'cause we're all here together, just living this life. Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it, but maybe you can do it twice. Yeah, you might think you're above it all, you might think you're something else. I can tell you right now that there's more than two types of hell, but there's only one heaven, and it's right here, right now.
And the police came in and they thoroughly enjoyed it. We used to play things like having too much fun. We're breaking the law, we're having too much fun, you know. It was very, very good, and the feelings were good.
Yeah, it's time to be righteous, time to be real. It's time to be made of timber, it's time to be made of steel. Oh, it's time to be made of lightning. Yeah, it's time to get this wheel rolling. Yeah, 'cause we're all here together, just living this life. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it, but maybe we could do it twice. You might think you're above it all, you might think you're something else. I can tell you right now, there's more than two types of hell, but there's only one heaven, and it's right here, right now.
Well, in those days, we're pretty well rocked. You didn't want to miss out on anything. So some days you'd be doing things in your own valleys, and other days you'd all go, or some you'd go to other valleys. But we pretty well always kept busy. It wasn't that we didn't have a lot of parties, but when we had them, they were fabulous. They were huge.
What Bellingen has attracted, because of the nature of the openness and the open-heartedness of the people that live in Bellingen, we could always get these teachers to come here because there is an audience for them, in the sense of people wanting to hear the teachings. And then we would also have those teachers go to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, but it would be typically the Australian capitals and Bellingen.
The alternatives were very environmentally aware.
We didn't have a political movement here. We just had a very strong feeling about what was being done in the name of the law, you know.
They fought to stop Coffs Harbour becoming a woodchip port. They fought to stop logging the black scrub in the Darkwood headwaters. They were strongly represented at the Terania Creek rainforest dispute and the sand mining battle at Middle Head.
Police arrived at Terania Creek.
We had a lot of environmental protests which were exhausting. You know, we'd go trundling off to the beaches and the forests.
No law whatsoever says I can't put my head out this window.
42 people arrested in a demonstration against sand mining at Middle Head on the north coast.
One of these rare forests that goes right down to the beach, and it was just beautiful. And they knocked it all over and put a dredge through and dredged everything and tossed it out to sea. It was just awful.
The 40 arrests of the first day's confrontation were just the beginning.
I was finally arrested. I think the official reason was I was obstructing the dredge.
In one dramatic week, there were over 100 arrests.
We all got off, of course, but it all politicised us.
One other thing that really in many ways defined this town too, and that was things like the Bishop's Creek Cup. I count those, if you look back on a long time in Bellingen, events like that.
They're racing a perfect dispatch too. Wave King on the inside, jumped out well with Grey Affair. High Furno got out smartly. Just behind them, Happy Union getting up into a handy position, and they were being followed by...
I think the truth of it is that what did break down the real recidivists that didn't want to kind of get on board the fact that human beings come in all shapes, sizes and colours and are all okay if you give them a chance, was those sorts of events. That there were a lot of locals at the Bishop's Creek Cup, and they realised it was a lovely, benign, nice, gentle thing to do.
It was an interesting, quite an enjoyable period really. I mean, they were, in the main, a very credible lot of people.
Redemption, play the fool, but I don't think that I will be playing by your rules anytime soon. Anytime soon. So I lay down my weapons, lay down my tools, I can risk it all if I have nothing to lose. And yes, I lay down and I listen to the west wind blow.
I have pretty fond memories of that particular, sort of 10 to 15 years anyway, and sort of still have some pretty good friends from that period.
Oh, now what we could be looking at is ashes and dust. So what we need is a shift in consciousness. I trust, cause I know I must. When all of humanity universal, cause every man.
Wow, I'm back in Bellingen. It's such a joy to come to Bellingen nowadays. It's so different. Like I'm standing outside Thor's Gourmet Meats, and that would have once been the good food shop.
There's still a number of people in Bellingen, they just, Darkwood up there amongst the bloody hippies, you know. And of course, there's no hippies left up here.
Like, did the hippies just all leave, or?
Well, no, see, all of the hippies have got to be old people, right? And they're no chickens anymore, and they don't like living up the bush too much. It's too cold in winter time, and too far, and they've moved on in a lot of instances. And
where have they gone?
Probably back to where they came from.
The hippies are staying home by the fire, thinking about other things.
Well, I think a lot of the established hippies kind of became a bit more normal for a start. Started wearing clothes. Yeah, but also running businesses and, taking on the responsibilities of life, bringing up families, having to get jobs. That sounds like a cliche, back to where you came from. What, do you think they came from Asia or somewhere?
Oh, they probably came from yuppie Sydney.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to believe how much Bellingen has changed. There's a whole lot of little towns like Bellingen off the highway up and down the north coast, but Bellingen has become quite sort of unique in that I think it's the hippie influence, that all the arty-farty people who were here, who came into the town and weren't so worried about chainsaws and cows' bums and got into the whole leisure lifestyle, and a lot of wealthy people have followed them here. And Bellingen has now become, some people even say it's a little bit yuppie, but I'm not sure that's true, but the DNA that the hippies put on the place has really shined. This is a bit flash walking across the street on a pedestrian crossing, but there you go. You could go into a real estate agent here and pay $1 million, $2 million, whatever. It's not cheap.
Most of the old hippies that are still around are no longer hippies, they're yuppies.
Like Bellingen would have died if it hadn't been for the hippies to come in big numbers and bringing the young kids and shopping in town. The hippies didn't go to Coffs Harbour to shop, they did everything in Bellingen.
We started with a social experiment that none of us realised how big and how deep and what it really meant, because as hippies we came here buying cheap land and the opportunity to build a house ourselves with our own hands out of the materials on the land, and have a free-form life without the pressures and strains of suburbia and the cities.
Let's see if I can cross this street. It used to be such a street that except for Friday and Saturday morning it would be deserted. You could stand here and not see a single car. Now you've got to take your life in your hands to get across the street.
I mean, eventually they realised, as they got to know us, that we weren't drug crazed nutters from, planet X.
Both sides needed to understand that stereotyping any group of people is a mistake, and you really have to take people on an individual basis. So I think that's how the community grew over time.
How do you find it now, living in Bellingen?
Oh, I love it. It still just has that dynamic.
It's a groovy town to be in. It's got a great feeling of, what's the word I'm looking for, community.
I miss the old Bellingen. I really do.
What is it you miss?
Well, Bellingen in those days, I mean, it was a little agricultural town. Today it's the city has moved in and pretty much consuming it with all their money and so forth.
What's special about Bellingen?
The nature of the people that have come here. And it's still true, and that's why whenever everyone asks me, do you miss the good old days in Bellingen? No, because the good old days are still here. It was then, it still is.
Everybody who comes to Bellingen gets involved in something that adds to that community. And that in turn has driven land prices up, so it costs more to live here than it does in Coffs Harbour.
But I think with the hippie movement, they brought in a lot of small cottage industries into the town in later years.
The market that was such a dispute is now the biggest market on the North Coast. It's quite wonderful.
It's been a great market and I had a good day, so I'm happy.
Excellent. Is it more interesting now than it was when you were a kid?
Oh, very much so, yeah. Yeah, I actually love the way Bellingen's developed over the years. It's so diverse now. Everyone gets on well with everyone. Doesn't matter what background you come from.
There's lots of good things that have happened with the new Bellingen. Everybody's got a lot more money, and that helps. There's a much brighter sort of vibe about it.
Realize I've been here before. Those shadows of death, they sit at my door. And this nightmare takes my gaze. Promises there is a better way.
Seed that was sown, a kind of that was about community, and that seed has kind of grown and flourished in Bellingen. There's no doubt about it. People pick up that energy, gets transferred from one generation or one wave of people to the next. It really does.
It's a place where people are on the forefront of what's going on in this world, today's world, and people have come here to find a resonance with their own humanity. That's what keeps Bellingen alive.
Yida, Jolumbo. Yida, always. Jolumbo, long ago. Always long ago. Yida, Yilana. Yida, always. Yilana, from here. Gumbangir, Gundi. Belonging to Gumbangir, Wajar, homeland. Always was, always will be Gumbangir, homeland.
Yari gangaya gapagu julum ku bangu Wurunda nungugundi Ya uban gugure uban bari
Yam Gumbangir Gundi Wajar.
Now what we need is a sustainable future, which we work together, in which we nurture our earth, our mother, for we have no other, which we can learn from each other and love one another. Time has come, revolution, it has begun, so let's rise together, rise and breathe. Rise rise and breathe as one.